In our first videos in this series, we've discussed the science of reading and how it fits within BEGLAD. We've discussed various strategies that can be utilized to build phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, phonics, and build fluency. Without those skills, it's going to be very difficult for students to be able to read complex text and understand and comprehend what that text says. Those particular skills tend to phase out over time. The skills we're going to talk about in this video, though, do not. In this video, we're going to focus specifically on vocabulary. Vocabulary is embedded in every aspect of BEGLAD. Every strategy that we utilize builds in vocabulary in some way. Whether it's in our focus and motivation strategies, where we are looking at observation charts, for example, there's vocabulary that goes along with those and concepts that go along with the unit of study. When we get to the inquiry chart, we're focusing on the topic of study for that particular unit, often a multisyllabic and key vocabulary word. In the big book, key vocabulary is embedded throughout so that students are getting exposure to, as well as instruction in, particular words and concepts that relate to the topic of study. In input, the vocabulary is embedded throughout, in our graphic organizer input chart, in our pictorial input charts, in the narrative input chart. All of these strategies utilize key vocabulary. In guided oral practice, the vocabulary is embedded in our poems and songs. We embed vocabulary in the sentence patterning chart. In reading and writing, we embed the vocabulary in the expert groups. We ask students to incorporate vocabulary in the cooperative strip paragraph. In virtually every strategy, vocabulary is highly emphasized, and this is something that never goes away. Vocabulary is always an important aspect of instruction. It starts in kindergarten and it continues throughout our lives. Because if I'm able to decode the word and I can read what it says, but I don't know what that word means, I'm not going to understand the text. Throughout our strategies, we teach vocabulary and we reinforce vocabulary. We ask students to embed vocabulary into their speech, into their writing. We're really emphasizing language and language instruction. And vocabulary is a critical part of that. So where does all this vocabulary from a unit come from? Well, there's multiple places that we can refer to. We can start with the standards. What is the language? What is the vocabulary that's embedded within our standards? We can also look at any curricular materials that we have. Often, particular materials will have lists of vocabulary or will have vocabulary embedded in the text that we can then extract and make sure that our students understand. The tricky part of vocabulary is that students will have knowledge of and gaps of particular words that you may or may not be able to predict. Sometimes our students know specific words that I never would have thought that they knew. Other times, we'll think that they would know this particular word and they don't. So we always have to keep a critical eye open as to which words students already know, which ones they're familiar with, which ones they don't know at all, and all in between. One aspect of teaching vocabulary that may not be obvious at first glance is building in instruction around morphemes. A morpheme is a unit of meaning. Unlike a phoneme, which we've discussed earlier, is a unit of sound. Take, for example, the word garden. Garden is one morpheme. We can't separate out word parts that carry meaning within that word. However, if we add the suffix er, we now have gardener. Two morphemes. By adding on the er suffix, we're saying a person who does this thing. If we add the plural s, that's another morpheme. Gardeners. More than one person who gardens in this case. As we're pointing out prefixes, suffixes, roots within words, as we do the word study in the Cognitive Content Dictionary, we're also building vocabulary learning strategies. Teaching students affixes or word parts, morphemes, such as prefixes, roots, and suffixes, helps give students the skills they need to understand words when they come across them. We cannot possibly teach every vocabulary word that exists and that students need to know. We have to give students the skills that they need to figure out and determine and decipher what words say. Within BEGLAD, we emphasize the direct, explicit teaching of vocabulary, but we also can give students particular skills to help them learn vocabulary words for themselves.